Inflation adjusted revenue declined by 54% to 497 million rands against the backdrop of a hyperinflationary environment, severe weakening of the Zimbabwean dollar, regular power outages, and a weaker cement market. Prospect Resources has announced an increase in the ore reserves estimate of its 87% owned Arcadia lithium project in Zimbabwe. Total probable ore reserves have been increased to 37.4 million tons, which further extends life of the mine from the initially projected 12 years and provides a pathway to update project economics. The Arcadia lithium project is currently one of the headline projects being undertaken in Zimbabwe and is considered to be one of the world's biggest hard rock lithium resources, providing Prospect with a globally unique position to be the only lithium producer that will produce both spodumene and petalite. In an interview earlier in the year, the company CEO said he expected offtake agreements from the Arcadia mine to increase from the current 34%. Let's have a look.
Prospect Resources completed a definitive feasibility study on Arcadia project, which is its prime asset, and this is based in Zimbabwe, and it's based just outside Harare. It's currently globally the 8th largest hard rock lithium deposit. It has a JORC reserve. This gives us a unique strategic competitive advantage, given that we are in the high grade category with a low strip ratio, and this seriously underpins our competitive advantage on a cash operating cost. So on an aggregated brine and hard rock cash operating quartile, we sit in the lowest cash quartile, providing us significant competition or competitive advantage in this lithium race. We also produce two products. One is a spodumene, with which everyone's familiar, and the other is petalite.
And moving to the quarter that you've just closed, tell us about progress or key milestones that you ticked off.
Most of our focus over the last quarter has been primarily on the funding, identifying the right funding partners and the right funding package for the Arcadia project. Most of our discussions have centered around development banks, and their remit is primarily to create opportunities and development, but in doing so, they only ever pick the best projects. We've been pleased to announce that Sinomine, our strategic partner and off-taker, currently a tier 1 chemical converter out of China, they have 34% of our offtake for the first 7 years. They've commenced construction on their lithium hydroxide plant, which is very pleasing for us. The program as it stands is set to complete just before we commence production at Arcadia project. In addition, we've successfully concluded a placement with Seven Hills Holdings, and about 50% of that placement was also participated with management options. Finally, we've been able to increase the ownership of Prospect into Arcadia project from 70% up to 87%, and we see direct benefit flow back to our shareholders.
Well, congratulations, you've definitely ticked a lot of goals. So what about this coming quarter? What can we expect?
Over the next quarter, our focus will continue to be on funding, again identifying the right funding partner, selecting them, and selecting and negotiating the right funding package for Arcadia project. In addition, we're looking for and planning a road trip, which will be to select and increase our offtake from 34% upwards. The trip that we have planned actually starts here in Sydney, but will take us to Korea, Japan, mainland China, and Europe. That's our dive.
The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has acquitted EcoBank after completing investigations into alleged diversion of funds into the black market. The allegations came after the circulation of a picture of new $5 and $2 notes on social media, which the bank allegedly injected into the parallel market. However, investigations by the central bank's Financial Intelligence Unit show that the bank complied with regulatory process in disbursing the 15,000 Zimbabwean dollars. Investigations are now focused on the client to note if the funds were used for their intended purpose. Caledonia Mining installed new diesel generators at the Blanket Gold Mine in Rwanda, giving the mine 18.5 megawatts of installed generator capacity. The new generators will provide 100% backup in the event of inefficient electricity supply. This comes at a time when the group is aiming at reducing dependence on the national grid as well as reducing operational costs. As part of the power projects, Caledonia is also planning on installing a 20-megawatt solar power plant at the gold mine. Caledonia Mining says their production was affected in the previous financial period due to power outages. Let's have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, Caledonia Mining is a Zimbabwe gold producer, and I'd like to just run through the presentation very quickly. I'm going to flick over a few of the slides. We are in a booth here and we do have some presentations, so if there's anything further that you would want to know on the slides I flick over, please come and see us. The normal and necessary disclaimer. Quick company overview. Caledonia is a listed gold producer, listed in New York, Toronto and London. We've been producing gold. We've owned the mine since 2006. It's been producing gold for 110 years in Zimbabwe, and we've got about 9 million, nearly 10 million in cash, and we believe we're undervalued, probably like most junior gold players, with a trading PE of about 4.5. The middle block just shows you some of our production profile. 2016 to 2018, relatively flat, 50 to mid 50,000 ounces. We're building a new mine underneath the existing mine, which will come into production 2022, and it'll ramp up to 75 and 80,000 ounces. Importantly, the all-in sustaining cost will drop quite dramatically. And when we're running at our run rate of 80,000 ounces, all-in sustaining cost will be between $700 and $800 an ounce. We're a dividend payer. We've been paying a dividend at the Caledonia level since 2013, about 27 cents a year per annum, on a yield of about 4.7% at the moment. All of the money that is being invested in this project, all the dividend that is being paid to Caledonia shareholders, comes from Zimbabwe. So the perception that you can't do business in Zimbabwe, you can't extricate cash, I'll hopefully try and explain that to you. But this is a picture that business can be done in Zimbabwe. Our medium-term project is to complete what we call the central shaft, which is effectively putting a 1.2 kilometer shaft down. That will be finished this month, the actual physical sinking. And then we will start equipping, which will take 12 months. And that allows us to build a new mine underneath the current operating mine, which is between levels of 750 meters down to 1,200 meters. So we're building a new mine from the cash generated from the old mine, and that will give us a life of mine of between 13 and 15 years, based on reserves and resources that we have at the moment. Longer term, we intend to, there's a slide that will show what the cash flow profile is going to look like. We intend to look at the utilization of this free cash flow that's going to come out of this operation for either returning to shareholders if we can't find a better use for it in country or maybe outside of country, but our focus is in country at the moment, or finding new opportunities in ladies and gentlemen.
TRUWORTHS sales volumes were down in the first quarter, which ended on 6 October 2019 by 68% compared to the same period in the prior year.